in the music industry, there was a when I was growing up, and I've seen this in my lifetime as a teenager when I was growing up in the 90s or 80s and 90s. The problem was, how am I going to get my music out there, and how am I going to get distributed? Like, how do I get into record stores?
Yeah.
Is the problem, right? And once you do that, like things, you know that it's going to be out there, it's going to be heard and whatnot. We have completely that overcome that problem, and now we have the opposite problem. Distribution is not an issue. I can make a song today in one day and get it up on Spotify and Apple Music and all these. Like, getting my music into the networks and the platforms is not a problem anymore, which was what the problem was earlier. Now it's a whole different problem. You can easily get out there, but everyone has a sea of music to choose from. How are you going to be the one that they choose?
Yeah.
This was not the problem of the 90s.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm going to say this upfront. I think we all need a little bit of anger to get shit done in this world. Now, let me back the statement with a couple of things that I think are important to understand when it comes to anger. Is it self-righteous anger, which we see everywhere, where everyone thinks they're wronged and they are the victim of their circumstance or of the world at large, and there's someone out to get them? No. I think there's a little bit of inner fury and inner fire for whatever reason, right? Now, one way to play this is the blame game, where you're like, oh, I can't get shit done because I'm the victim, I'm being pushed into a corner. The other way is to use this now, whether it's a perceived injustice or whether it's your circumstance or a consequence of something that has happened to you or something which is not in your control. Could be, I'm looking at the things I've done in my life, right? When sometimes people talk about disability, they're like, oh my God, isn't it just amazing to see what they've done with the choices they have? Fuck you, right? Because sometimes it's not the choices that you have, it's the lack of choices you don't, or the choices you don't, it's the lack of choices you have, basically. And this thing of, let me put it this way, right? In 1993, when someone saw a guy or a girl who couldn't see, they would probably say, oh, poor bastard can't see. In 2023, they call them inspiring. Now, you would think, oh, isn't that a great way we've come forward? 30 years, the perception. I don't think that's what it is. I think it's just the word is now being used without the intention behind it. It's so easy to say inspiring and get away with it because you've said the right thing, and the person who's hearing it is like, I can't say anything now because I can't call someone an asshole for calling me inspiring, but I think you should, because inspiring no longer holds the weight that inspiring should have, because inspiring was something that really makes you feel like you're a part of that person and they wake up an inner fire within you. Now it's just like I can say it and get away with just doing the right thing, not more than that, saying the right thing and being accepted by the community and not standing out like a total prick that I am. And am I being bitter? I'm not being bitter. I think what I'm trying to understand here is saying the word inspiring is almost patronizing in some way, going, you know what? The person who's the subject of the inspiration, or the source of the inspiration, isn't necessarily a person who's doing it to inspire, right? In many cases, they're just managing and they're just kind of making do with their situation. They can easily sit at home and mope because they don't have a certain sense, so they don't have all of it there physically, some of it psychologically, some of it emotionally, some of it mentally. And the thing is that rather than just shrivel up in a corner and call it quits, they're trying to do something. Now, by you sitting there going, I've got everything and you are so inspiring, I think it just feels a little fucking annoying. It's like me going to a guy who can't hear and say, guys, listen, man. I mean, not listen, but you know what? Listen, hearing is not all it's cut out to be. Or someone coming and tell me, dude, man, you're not missing out much on driving. The traffic's so bad anyway. Hey, fuck you. You have the choice of driving. I don't, right? So the thing is, when I choose to say, hey, you know what? At least I can get around, I'm trying to make the best of a situation which isn't that good. I mean, given the choice, maybe I wouldn't drive, but that's a choice which I don't have. I'm just giving you an example. And this is the thing. If you can play the victim card, which everyone's expected to play today, and people surround you with words like celebration and you're a hero and you're inspiring, I think it's just fucking patronizing and preachy. Because this whole thing of normal and disabled, abnormal, I think is if you look past the words, it's just a bunch of people trying to feel good about themselves. At the end of the day, we all are trying to feel appreciated and feel good about ourselves. But how do you feel better when you're not looking at the biggest thing which you have, which is yourself, your family, and your friends. And if you don't have that, and if you're looking to the outside world for approval, for validation, then you get this situation where people feel good about themselves because they can look down on someone who doesn't have it all, whether it's financially, whether it's physically, whether it's mentally, and say things in a preachy, in a patronizing way, like, wow, you're inspiring, you're such a leader, you give me so much hope. Like, because they feel good about themselves by saying those things because of whatever reason they have. And the people who are spoken to like that feel like they can't do anything about it because these are so-called words of encouragement or titles of recognition. And I don't know, man. I feel more and more as we go forward, people are doing this, right? Where your three best friends, I think, in the world are yourself. That's basically you looking within you. Is your family who's there to support you. Sometimes maybe not, and your close friends. And many times if we don't have this, then these words start taking more power from people who don't mean anything to you, people who've done fuck all for you, and people who just get by life drifting because they're like, you know what, this person is, if in a situation threatens me, then you know what, you see the situation changing on its head. But it's at a distance, it's very easy to comment on YouTube saying this guy is so inspirational, it's so amazing to see his inspiring story, the journey that inspires me. It's very nice to flower and petal things with those words, but when the true weight of the meaning behind the word and the intention behind the word and the concept is gone, then what are we doing? We're just sitting there massaging our egos by feeling bad and saying the things that are accepted at large, which is the narrative today. And that's fucking annoying. So yeah, would I prefer someone called me a poor blind bastard? Better than say someone not meaning inspiring and just doing it because they feel good. And I feel, yeah, there are a lot of people who do this now where they just kind of piggyback on the cause of the day. Now it's the big talk is DEI, and you have a lot of people who are like, "Wow, I got a chance to speak on." No, you don't get a chance because someone said it's okay for you to speak. You create your own stage in the 20 fucking first century, in 2023. Your voice is as important, and it's not because you're able or disabled or you have an inspirational story. It's just that you're a human being who deserves your voice to be heard. And if that's not an interesting voice, then you know, too bad. Make it interesting. And it's not because of a certain ticket or a certain flag or a certain card or a certain personality or a certain group that you belong to. I think there's a certain human need to be heard, and it's human, not a disabled need, not a woman's need, not a transgender need. It's just a need to be appreciated, recognized. And I think that entire journey starts with you. And it starts with how you look at yourself, where you are. And of course, it's hard losing an eye, losing sight, losing hearing, losing your physical mobility, having cerebral palsy, having a mental disability. All these are difficult things. We would all like to have all of it, but we don't. And the thing is that we're not trying to inspire and overcome our challenges. We're just trying to fucking live. We're trying to manage with what we have. Aren't we all in some way? For some, it's just more of a situation which is harder to manage. And that's why I get fucking pissed off when people are like, my God, he's so angry. And my wife asked me the other day, why do you always react so angrily? I'm like, because it fucking sucks not to see at times. When you wake up in the morning and someone's put a bucket unknowingly or knowingly in front of you and you stumble the first thing in the morning or stub your toe or walk into shit because someone hasn't cared. And this starts at home sometimes. So if you're like, if this is the situation at home where it's so fucking annoying, imagine the world at large which doesn't give a shit about you. So you're managing, you're not inspiring. No one fucking talks about, wow, he tripped on a bucket and still made it to breakfast. That's not fucking inspirational stories which are going to be picked up by woke media. I'm sorry to say it. I might sound like the negative bastard, but I think once in a while you need to fucking check your assholes and make sure that we aren't just blowing smoke up each other's asses and trying to make do with like, oh, inspiring and great fucking platform and all these stupid things that we seem to do today. Because you know what? I'm not saying being mean and hurtful is nice, but neither is it being full of shit. So yeah, that's my little piece there. Because what is inspiring for you and for me is legendary things that human beings have achieved. And I think that goes just like how for every real accusation of Me Too, there were thousands of false accusations. And the real cases, the real problems when did not get the recognition, did not get the attention because of all these other fluffy fuckers who wanted to get the attention, get the limelight for 2 seconds and make it made up shit, putting people down. Just like that, the real inspirations get drowned out by these kind of people using words loosely to feel good about themselves. And let's really recognize and celebrate and be inspired by the things that are truly inspiring. And for me, one of those things which I think human beings and a human collective we've achieved is music. The evolution of music has been fucking phenomenal. It's been there for thousands of years. It's across different cultures, different languages, different regions, each human being within that region, each human being within that region and within that particular area of that region has a different expression, their affinity to music, the way they perceive music, the way they produce, the way they make music. And I find that amazing, right? We talk about vibes and vibrations and we talk about the vibing with the music. And the reason I'm talking about music, well, it's because today's guest is a musician, a music engineer, a songwriter, a singer. So I think it's apt. And I genuinely think that music is something which is a great human, um, I wouldn't say invention, but it's a great human creation, a human potential, and it reflects on where we've come from, where we were. And um, I really think that it's a great thing what music does to us, right? The way we each individually react to different kinds of music, and each individually within our lifetimes, the different kinds of music. When I was 17, 18, I loved Megadeth and Iron Maiden and thrash metal, and now I'm listening to all sorts of things from John Mayer to Pink Floyd. I sometimes go back to Billy Joel. I go back to Elton John. I listen to Dua Lipa. I might even listen to that song which everyone is talking about. Exactly which song, I don't know, it keeps changing every second. So Abhijeet Tambe is my guest today, and we have a pretty fantastic chat about music, right? His musical journey, how he got into music, how he perceives music as an engineer, but yet also as a person who didn't learn music theory and learn the professional path to learning music, the way he discovered the love for the instrument, how the instrument and he grew together, and where he is today, and where the music industry is today, and how music is distributed, and what other themes we are seeing, the recurring aspects of music from the 90s to the 2000s to 2023, and what can we expect and what music in its essence does to human beings, and also talk about Abhi's journey of where he was 20, 30 years back to where he is today, and how he is using music as a tool and a medium to tell his story, how he develops his craft, how he develops his product, and what he has to offer to you as a listener today. It's a fun conversation, and frankly, I had a lovely time, and I'm sure you'll have a lovely time listening as well. So thank you for listening, and without further ado, here's my conversation with Abhijeet Tambe. Enjoy. It's inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
Abhi Tambe, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It's been overdue, long overdue, but we're finally here doing this today.
Indeed. Thank you for having me, Sandeep.
Now, it's really a pleasure to talk to a musician, a music engineer, and I want to know more about that. But we were just talking before I hit record because I wanted it to be spontaneous in the flow. You mentioned this thing about a speaking voice and a music singing voice, and you clearly have both sound good. And this is not because we're on air, but I genuinely think you have a good voice in both departments. So, um, how does one go from one to the other? Because um, it seems like there is a way to copy someone's voice. Like you hear a lot of these guys at karaoke nights nailing Journey or Queen or Bruno Mars, but also then you have someone like a John Mayer who technically doesn't have a great voice, but really delivers his music with a lot of soul. So is that a journey of finding your voice or a journey of being trained to have a certain voice?
Yeah, I'm sure it's actually a bit of both, that finding your voice and the training. And I think I'm discovering a lot of this stuff recently because I'm not actually a trained musician. So I've had to do a lot of the training part of it late in life. When I was younger, I think I was able to wing it in certain ways. But now I've found in the last few years that I have some ambitions and I've actually started having a relationship with training and practice. And so I can comment a bit about that. And it's really amazing what you can achieve if you actually put in work behind, anything that you want to be good at with your instrument, with your voice, with the singing voice, the speaking voice. Just that whole training thing is amazing. But I think that to survive the sort of the drudgery of going through training like a lot, because the more you need to get better, the more you need to train. I think you need to come at it with a lot of fire. You really have to want to find that voice and find not just something. I think when you go through your own version of training, whatever that might be, you may find out that you can't actually sing like a Billy Joel or a Mark Knopfler, but you do end up finding out what you can sing like what your natural abilities are good at, and you start discovering your own voice in that process. So I think there's a strong interrelationship between the two, and especially the fire to want to find it. That'll get you through the training sessions and hopefully eventually to the goal of finding your voice.
Which is, I think, so important in a day like today, in today's times where there's so many synthesized voices being put out there. And I just recently read that Apple has now given opportunities for people publishing through them with their Apple books to have synthesized voice, converting their books into audio. And again, a lot of musicians coming out there saying, our voices are being used by AI, and there's a lot of IP violation in their opinion, which is of course true. Images, voices. So in a time like that, developing your own voice, and this is something I remember people talking about in stand up as well, is you can sound. When I mean sound, it's the actual voice, but also the way you tell your story. You can be inspired by a Dave Chappelle or a Robin Williams, but if you sound like them, there is only one Mark Knopfler, Dave Chappelle, Robin Williams. So the sooner you are able to put in the work, figure out what it is that you want to say and how you want to say it, and in music, how you want to sing it and express it, the sooner you will arrive at the point at which you can start telling your story. Otherwise, you're constantly just going in circles trying to go from one voice to another voice, or one form of telling stories to another. And for you, being an informally trained, if that's the right word, a musician, how did that journey begin for you? Finding, because now you're saying you are looking at more of the formal training aspect, but when you started out, was it just the fire, the thrill of performing music for a public gathering, or was it a different approach?
Yeah, I think it was definitely a lot to do with that, the thrill of performing live. It's. I think most performers, musicians, and otherwise will, and you included, right? The thrill of getting on a stage and actually talking to an audience. There's something really special about that. But that apart, I think I don't come from a family of musicians, but I definitely come from a family of music aficionados. My dad is big into Hindustani classical music and some amount of film music. My sister is was really always tuned into the hits coming across from the BBC. I remember one of my early memories as a kid in the 80s was my sister hunched over this two-in-one Sanyo radio and tape deck that we had with the antennas pointing upwards, and she's hunched over there, tuning into the BBC, the top 10 hits, the top 20 hits. And she was always in touch, although this was before we got MTV and Channel V and all that stuff. And she was recording this stuff on cassettes. And so she knew what was going on out there. And as a consequence, I knew, because I would listen to those cassettes too. So I think the appreciation of music and good music was there early on, but I didn't actually touch a guitar until I was like in like the first PUC or second PUC or something like that, pre-college. And then I started having to learn pretty quickly because everyone else that was playing in bands had been playing for quite a long time. But then I realized that I don't know whether to call it, uh, I don't mean to disrespect people with actual disabilities, but it's some kind of an inability to sit there and train and practice. I just couldn't do it. I was too
Mm.
distracted, too not focused. And I knew I could see that it would probably help if I could do that, but I just couldn't sit there. I would get all antsy. And about 30 years later or something now, I'm actually starting to find out what is that makes it so difficult. Like, who is that internal enemy inside me that makes sitting down and practicing so difficult? I'm actually just coming to terms with that. But that's how I started. And so I would try to pick up songs, because I think that's the way that everyone, picks up music. You pick up your favorite songs and you try to play them your way. I did an okay job. I was never that great at doing covers. But I found, to my pleasant surprise at the time, that I had a tendency to try to write songs and make my own songs. And I found that that was something that I had far more confidence doing, weirdly enough, because I meet a lot of people now who are the opposite. They know how to pick up songs or play covers pretty well, but they struggle with writing their own songs. Wasn't the case for me. And so I think more or less I stuck with that. I thought, hey, if this is what I can do, then this is what I will do. No matter that there is not much of a market for it right now, at least in India. Um, but I stuck with it. And indeed, I think times have changed since the time that I was a teenager and through my 20s and 30s and now in the 2010s. I think it's like original music and independent music is become huge in India. I think the market for cover music actually has become smaller than it. Like everyone wants to know what your songs are. So I'm really happy with that. But that's been
Mm.
my journey. Never really ever trained or like had a lot of trouble with practicing unless it was structured a certain way. But only recently I've started actually finding that enemy and trying to overcome and get through that practice, because it's really quite rewarding if you can get through it.
Yeah, and I think that's such a difficult process to get through because over the lockdown, I've always been fascinated by the guitar. As the for some of the reasons you mentioned, but also it's this. The guitar comes with a certain charm, especially with the ladies. When you a solo guitarist, playing it, at least for the teenage me, and also later on, and it keeps coming and going, like this need to play the guitar. And I played the piano a little bit, and again, I got caught with the practice problem, right? Because when you listen to people talking about how their journey with an instrument was and where it got them, it gets you inspired, gets you all fired up to go play the instrument. And it's tedious, right? Play the chords, the scales, and go over and over again. And then you figure out, okay, there are other elements to it, like timing, and then you have different notes, and each note can do multiple things. And this is with whichever instrument you're playing. And then you realize, man, it's not that important to please the ladies, because this is a pain. This is a painful process, and it's not worth it. The one who needs to find you will find you, and then you come up with all sorts of different theories about love and saying the guitar is not that important. But I find, you know, when in my attempt, or my fourth or fifth or sixth attempt with a teacher in Bangalore, and I'm sure Tony Das, and going
I
through.
do, and he told me you're a good student.
Thanks. I think he's being very kind, because I was, I couldn't get timing. I couldn't get the up down stroke, and I would always end up hitting every note or strumming every direction, and that would frustrate me, right? Then he would give me an exercise and I would try it. And similarly with even vocal lessons, which I took with another teacher in Bangalore, a couple of times I would I would record the notes, and I would close the door and do these things, and I'm like, after 10 times doing it, I'm like, I should sound like Freddie Mercury at some point. It's going to click, and it didn't, and I'm like, screw this. So the thing is, when you're learning and you're self-taught, and of course now you're looking at a different direction of practice and the discipline and why you aren't able to and how to get over that many years later, but which aspect of learning an instrument, of course you have the notes, the melodies, there's so many technical terms which you can throw in here, but what did you find that helped you the most to come along your way? Was it timing? Was it just finding a note? Because you said you found a way to express your own lyrics into song. But which aspect of the instrument, or learning the instrument, did you find helped you along your way?
Hmm. Which aspect of learning the instrument helped me along my way? I would say that what I was doing, although I guess that was what I said initially was a bit of a disclaimer that I've had so much of trouble with practice. But what I discovered along the way was that that might be what people often describe as being practice. That is, for a guitar player, that might be something about running scales and being very, very familiar with your fretboard in a certain kind of way that is prescribed in a certain form of teaching. That stuff is very important if that's the kind of music that you want to play. But it also that brings about that question, like, what kind of music do you want to play? Do you want to be a lead guitar player, or do you want to be a rhythm guitar player? I actually love rhythm guitar players, like
Mhm.
people who can really play good rhythm guitar, or like, and I think my aspiration right now is about that, like being able to play rhythm really well.
Mm.
I never really aspired to play lead. I think I used to do it when I was in my teens, just because, like you said, like that seemed to be like this iconic thing to be able to do. But subsequently, I think I just shifted my aspirations to being able to play rhythm. And that has to be about, I think, holding down a beat and really getting that tone and that crunch and that nice chug going, and, getting the timing just absolutely right. Timing is crucial in any form of, like, no matter what you do in music, you just, without timing, you're going to be having some trouble. And I know, because I've had trouble with timing myself, and it's something that I've been working on quite a lot recently. But I think the thing that really helped probably was this form of invisible practice, which is of me trying to do things that I wanted to do. So as long as you're spending time with your instrument in some way, trying to do something, I think it's going to amount to like time spent like in some form of practice. If you're not actually using your instrument for doing to do anything, then you're not practicing at all. But if you're trying, it may not be defined as practice. You may not be running scales or doing this, but you may be trying to find some chord or do something, just doodling around and finding your way, just discovering your own chords, putting your finger here and there. That's time spent with your instrument. And now my new sort of way of looking at it is, it may not be the practice that someone else defines as being practice, but if you can just put in that time and build up those hours and just keep spending the time with your instrument, you'll be in good shape. And then eventually what starts to kind of take shape at some point is that at some point you start being able to do something that's very interesting to you, and then you might start having aspirations. Like, you're playing something, and then you're realizing that, but I'm not able to hit that note, and if only I could hit that note. How do I hit that note? I got to figure something out. So either you're going to go to Nisia Majoli, or you're going to look up YouTube and find out how to, just Google it or whatever, and then find some lesson and then start trying it at home. And but if you have that aspiration, that your aspiration is going to take you a long way, I think. And I
Mm.
think that's kind of what my new mantra is about, letting my aspiration guide me. So I'm no more in that space of I'm going to run some scales or just run after someone to teach me, master teach me guitar or something. Rather, in my current context, I'm doing something. I've got an album out, and I'm trying to play those songs well. What's missing? What am I not doing well? And how can I work? How can I really work like crazy on that part that I'm having trouble with right now, which is what I need. The other stuff, I think I'll need it for my next album. So I'll figure out getting lessons or working on those things later. But for now, it's whatever I'm aspiring to do right now. I think, does that answer your question? I'm not sure if it
Yeah, I
does.
think I love that approach because, there's so much information, there's so much temptation to compare yourself with other players, with other musicians, especially today with everyone uploading their version, their songs, everything from covers to their original music. And there's this pressure to compete with your learning, right? You have to pick
Right.
up things quickly. And as a result, there are people who are offering coaching lessons and voice training and guitar lessons. And you have companies now with, I think, what's it called, like Singalong or Musically or these things. And, as a result, it's very overwhelming for someone who's not able to pick up in the conventional form of practice, or for someone who's not able to deliver a song within 6 months of learning. And sometimes even that's the motivation. If you can do a song in 1 month, it's like yoga, right? And a lot of people are taking up yoga certification and they're like, I could do a headstand in 1 week. It's like, is that the point, right? And what I
Mm.
like about your approach is that you picked up the instrument, you spend time with it, there's familiarity, there's a bond, and you have your own approach to practice, which is not conventional. And over the course of time, you understand what the next step is, which is established by you for a certain reason, for a project or a song or a certain different direction you're taking the journey with the instrument on. And I like that because it gives you the clarity, or not clarity, but the relationship with that instrument, which is so personal, yet it's on your own journey with it, as opposed to a certain externally applied goal, which a lot of people get intimidated by, which eventually makes them give up on the instrument, which um, is sad, right? It's unfortunate that not everyone's able to, if they can afford the instrument, there should be a way of using that to get pleasure in some way. And
Sure.
especially now with so many different things, tools and resources, more people should be playing the instrument. And the reason I said I love your approach is because I feel, just like some people say a sport is so important for a child as they're growing up, I feel a musical instrument is such an important journey. And it could be a person who does 10,000 hours and plays for an orchestra, or it could be what you're saying, and everything should be okay. There shouldn't be one approach to it. And I think that's so good in the formative years, in the development of the brain, and what the sounds do to the human brain as the child is growing up. And I think it shouldn't be discounted because they can't play to a certain level, or they can't graduate a certain level of piano, and it
Right.
turns them, and I find
Right.
that a really encouraging way that you've approached the music that you are engaged in.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been thinking about music a lot too, and one of the things that I find very fascinating for a while now, I've thought about this, is that do you notice that although not many people are actually able to play music or can claim to be a musician or something like that, but like most people, like 99 out of 100 people I know appreciate music. Like they would have favorite songs and favorite pieces of music, some more than others, but almost everyone is moved by music in some way. And what on earth is music? Like it's some vibrations coming out of a speaker that are traveling through the air, doing something inside your ears. It's actually for a long time been quite a mystery, and even now continues somewhat to be, because when you talk about things like food and tasty food versus not tasty food, immediately the evolutionary biologist will come into the picture and find an evolutionary reason why you like something a lot and why you dislike something a lot, because it probably has something to do with your chances of survival. So you develop those tastes in evolutionary ways. But music has been a bit of a mystery, why it appeals to so many people, why it is so universal, and yet it's hard to trace evolutionarily what advantage really you get from being able to like music. Like, what is that really about? And I have a couple of books that I've been reading on the topic, and they are quite fascinating. But I think I've veered off topic, but there was something about what you're saying that made me think about is this. It's hard to actually play music because you have to really put in the time and tune your body and mind and what you're hearing to what you're actually able to do with your body and get that synchronization and listen and play at the same time. That stuff takes a lot of time and practice. But being able to appreciate it, that, babies are born with that, I think.
No, this is absolutely, you know, it fascinates me, right? Because when you play, like, say something like, even, and this is coming from an absolute novice at the instrument, right? But like, say when I played the piano for quite a few years, and I played better than the guitar in my own way. But when I would get into this flow of playing whatever it could be, right? It wasn't a song. It was just the fingers moving along the keyboard in such a nice way. It gave me some pleasure. It gave me some kind of, as you said, the vibration, the connection, right? But of course, the moment my rational brain would kick in and say, "But this is not piano, man. This is not, um, you know, uh, what do you call that? Elton John, Crocodile Rock." And then again, I would switch off and I say, "Okay, now we have to practice that song." But there's such a big difference between playing an instrument and having a bond with it, and what that makes you feel, versus appreciating music, right? And as I told you a couple of times when we were speaking over the phone, when my daughter was born, from day one, she was, um, she I think she had a connection with music, because she would sleep to music when she was being rocked, and she would love Barry
Okay.
Manilow.
Hey, nice.
Yeah. 3 months later, I was rocking her, and I would always play John Mayer, and that my joke between my wife and I was like, man, and she would sleep within maybe the first time we would play New Light. And I'm like, you know what? When she's a teenager, I hope she never goes for a concert of John Mayer, because she'll be asleep in less than a second, right? But she loved it, right? And then now she's 18, 19 months. Um, and she likes the baby songs, right? Coco Melon, and she likes Kookaburra. But it's literally like, I played that new song by Sia and the Punjabi producer Has Has, and she loves just moving to the music, whether it's Baby Calm Down, whether it's the baby songs. And the other day she's sitting and having dinner. She's not eating. My mom's like, okay, I'm going to play Kookaburra. She's like, no, no. She calls my grandma, my mom, Mana. She's like, Mana, John Mayer. And she's barely learned words, right? In her own way, she said John Mayer, and she's like shaking her head
Right.
to slow dancing in a burning room. And I'm like,
Ah, yeah.
there's something to this. So I let her have a go at the piano, and I don't instruct her. I don't place her fingers. I just open the keyboard, and I say go. I don't say anything. I just let her sit. I hold her from the back, and she's just fascinated with what her fingers hitting those keys do. And I'm like, isn't that amazing? Like, there's absolutely no outcome I'm looking for. I don't want her to be like a person who picks up the piano 2 years and then every guest who comes home, I play the piano for the. I don't want that expectation. But just to see the difference between what music does to her when she listens to it and what it does to her when she has access to playing it. I think yeah, it's fascinating what um, the sounds do to us, right? Just like
Yeah.
how, as you said, your dad is a big fan of Hindustani classical, so is my mom. And morning she plays it when she's in the kitchen, she's making, and it's solace for her, right? But I can't go near that because I'm like, oh God, it's boring, right? But again, someone will wake up, listen to 2 hours of Suprabhatam and gives them so much peace. Or the different kinds of music affecting different kinds of people. Like when I was 18, I loved Slipknot and Megadeth and Metallica and Iron Maiden. Sometimes now I can't listen to that, but I can listen to hours of, like these guys like Mark Knopfler, John Mayer, Elton John, Billy Joel. So what do you think it is? I mean, as you said, it's vibrations, it's sounds. And now this is where you are a musician and also an engineer in the music space. So what are these things doing um, to the brain, like on a vibration front? Is it chemically inducing certain things? And in your experience, exposure to music from a young age, like say a baby, to does it have any outcomes over the course of the child's life?
I'm not sure about your second question
Hmm.
about exposure to music as a child. What kind of outcomes that has when you grow older. Although, as a musician, I would have to say I'm pretty sure the outcomes are good.
Yeah.
Being exposed to music. But your first question about what is music actually doing. I read this great book. I was actually searching for this answer a few years ago and started really getting into it. And I found one excellent book called Sweet Anticipation. And I think it's still in the domain of theory. I don't think it's really well understood. And I don't know whether it's a research topic that's really talked about a whole lot. Like if you Google it or something, I don't think you'll find a lot. Like, although for me, it's a huge burning question. Like, why doesn't everybody talk about this? What is music?
Yeah.
So to start with, what is sound anyway? And it turns out that sound is nothing more than like a sense of hearing is about picking up vibrations through the air. So whenever any object vibrates, it sets off the air around it to also vibrate in a certain way, and those vibrations come and they enter your ear, and then there's a sort of an electromechanical system in there that your eardrum vibrates and sets off your cochlea, and some of your nerves actually start sending signal which is for a certain frequency. They identify the nature of the vibrating air. But music is a very special kind of vibration. Like it's apart from like what we're doing right now is we're vibrating these microphones. There's going to be some kind of a vibrating part in there, whether it's just a kind of a filament or a part of a capacitor. We're both using condenser mics, so it's going to be the plate of a capacitor. But that vibration actually in an electromagnet creates electricity, and at the other end, you again vibrate the drivers in your headphones, and those create the sound that enters your ear. So it's all vibration. But with music, why is it so interesting and why is it so well loved? Well, according to this book Sweet Anticipation, it's a really great combination of two things. And as a storyteller, you'll be interested in this, Sandeep. So, first of all, with something like rhythm, which is like rick, chak, 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 tick, chak, 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 you're giving something that is rhythmic, and you can identify the pattern of it. As a listener, to something, we look around the world around us, and we're trying to identify patterns. So this book goes into the evolutionary theory. He says, hey, you want an evolutionary biologist explanation for why music is so cool? Check this out. And this is
Mm.
what he says. He says that as humans evolved from primates and started living in more and more complex societies, it started becoming more and more important for us to not just react to what's going on right now, but anticipate what is about to happen in the next moment or in the next coming moments or in the future, etc. So, because that's the nature of human interaction in a society, right? Like it's not just right now, but hey, that guy is giving me strange looks. I think something might happen tomorrow. I got to watch out for this person, that. So the species starts to gets very future oriented, and it actually really pays off. Those that are able to actually see what's happening now and predict what happens in the future start to do well. And as a skill, we evolved to actually give ourselves a reward, and a dopaministic kind of a reward every time you make a good prediction. So, an example would be, just imagine you throw a dice, and as it's rolling, you predict what number it's going to be. And
Yeah.
then you say six, and it shows a six. Aren't you going to feel happy?
Yeah.
Something's going to happen, right? You get this little dopamine kick, like, yeah, I got it right before it happened. Now, shift that scenario and understand that if you agree that you're getting a dopamine kick every time you predict something correctly, just think about what's going on with music. There's a rhythm, like and as you hear this rhythm, you know when the next one is going to come. And when it comes, you get a little kick. It's like, hey, I got it. It's a pattern, and I'm identifying what this pattern is. It totally works.
Mm.
Now, that's fine. But after some time, there is something called boredom, which starts to kick in. Because if you just keep going click, 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 then after a
Mm.
while, it's like, yeah, okay, I got it. So
Yeah.
then what happens is, if you start doing something interesting with the rhythm, so you go, you're still playing within the rhythm, like I'm hitting an upbeat instead of a downbeat or something. But what you're doing to a listener over there is you're playing games with their pattern recognition mind. The monkey mind is like, wait, what? What? Oh, yeah, okay, I got it. Hey, oh, wait, what is that? Ah, got it. Now that's it. So musicians are often playing with this idea of uh, giving the listener something that they can hold on to and latch on to rhythmically, that can keep them grounded, but also not get bored. So always keep trying to make something a little bit interesting, unexpected, and then you come back later to do something that's going to actually resolve later. And now when you're starting to talk about tension and resolution, which musicians talk about a lot, it's also something that storytellers talk about a lot, right? Like you're going to create a bunch of tension so that you can create a kind of a resolution later, and there you get your reward and stuff like that. So in music, this is literally apparently happening in like in milliseconds. Like it's like every second of every note that's being played, there's something like a root note if you're on a root chord or something like that. But as long as you're not, every time you hit that root note of your song, that's some kind of resolution. If you start doing that too often, then your song starts becoming very predictable and boring. But
Mm.
once you establish a root note, like let's say your song is on G major, if you keep hitting the G note all the time, like la, 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 then that's boring.
Yeah.
But if you establish that as being the root and you play all around it and hit it not so often, you hit it only when you want to give your listener the reward of resolution, and you really play with how often you're doing it and how much tension you're holding with a major seven note instead of hitting the root, or with a minor or something like that. So I think this, whether musicians know it in these terms or not, according to that book, what you're doing is you're playing with your listeners expectation of what's about to happen. You're messing with it and then giving it a little bit later, so that they do kind of, you keep them on their toes, but also give them lots of rewards for knowing that, oh, okay. And so classic example that I love to play with is, you've been working on some songs, so there's this whole thing of verse, chorus, verse, chorus, the classic song structure. And then there's something called a bridge, which is usually after the first verse, first chorus, then the second verse and second chorus. A sort of a 101 song, a songwriter would say, okay, now it's time to go into the bridge. And in the bridge, what happens is, it's your chance to do something different. Like, it's the verse is like where you tell your story. The chorus is where you create this sort of motif that keeps repeating and giving you a little bit of resolution. The bridge is where your story takes a turn. This is when the Joker escapes from jail and is like, oh, wait, I thought they caught him or something.
Yeah.
And the now what happens? So you've gone into your bridge, and now you've created a world of indeterminacy in your listener's mind. Like, where are you going? And sometimes, you start going into some different, like, related chords, or even start putting in notes that were not part of the original thing. But the big trick in the bridge is you can do a lot of crazy and fun things, but how are you going to come back and hit that big chorus? Because you got to come back convincingly. You can't suddenly say, oh, now it's this chorus. You got to come back and bang that chorus so that, oh, I see, you went this big route to come back. And that's how you found musically your journey back to that big final third chorus that ends the song. Um, so it's about taking the person on a journey where they don't know what's happening, but at the end you bring them back home to what they do know. Um, yeah, that's, I think, the theory of music in 5 minutes.
No, and I find that amazing because if you don't bring them back to that place of familiarity, they feel very betrayed. Even
Yeah,
with joke telling or storytelling, which is
true.
also the same thing. If you are a catchphrase person, or say there's a callback, right? When you are taking that person back, they feel good, but you do it too many times, they're like, okay, dude, what are
Yeah,
you doing, right?
yeah,
So similarly, if you take them on a tangent, you take them on a diversion of the story, you take it down a different path, or whether it's a story, or say you're doing one liners and suddenly you do long form,
right,
um, they want you to come back to that, and that's you if you don't, they almost feel like you've let them down and you've moved ahead without taking them along on the journey. And that's
right.
fascinating, right? Because I was reading some time back that there's this new thing, I don't know if it's new, but there's this thing called comfortable consumption, or familiar, I don't know if the term is defined, but
Okay.
basically, because of these streaming services putting out so much music, it's not anymore um, a situation now for people to buy an entire album, like how we used to with a CD or a cassette or an LP, and listen through and through. But you are more um, conditioned, or more um, likely to go to a playlist. So the
Right,
playlist like Spotify would do, or Last FM would do, which would be, if you like Fields of Gold by Sting, you might like this, the suggestions,
right,
right? And the playlist
right.
is formed. So
Yeah.
what this particular concept says is that, say, Kygo, who was really big 3 years back, and probably still big, came up with this particular sound and beat, so rhythm and melody, which became the song, um, that popular one, whatever, Fire something, Firestorm. And
I'm
then
not sure.
that's basically a big song which came out a few years back. And then
Okay.
that became Kaigo's style. But then you notice a lot of other artists started doing, playing with a similar kind of melody
Right,
and rhythm.
right.
Because apparently, when you are being thrown 100 songs on a streaming service, you want stuff that sounds similar.
Hmm.
Um, you know, and as a result, when you become a musician who's trying to put out your own thing, it jars with what the popular consumption pattern is. Again, that was 3 years back. This year, if you look at, the beats are more like the African beats, like the Calm Down and those other songs. So it seems like there's a cycle where, the sound and the melody and the rhythm, or if I don't know if I'm using the right musical terms, are being accepted by, or being marketed, or whatever it may be. I don't know which machine is pushing which agenda, or if there is one. But with these quick turnaround music services, streaming services, it seems like that is the challenge for a musician, where they have to play to this particular expectation of the listener.
Hmm. Hmm. I would argue though that I think that may not be such a new thing just conceptually, because every era has had its music, right? Like the
Mm,
80s, when we say 80s music, we know what we you know what you're talking about, and there was no streaming services then. And 70s music has a certain sound, right? 70s rock, and 60s, 80s is the electronic sort of decade, and 90s is when we started getting the grunge sound and whatnot.
mm,
So I think that musical styles have always traveled, and this is something that musicians have always been subjected to, like that the time that they live in, there's a certain popular sound that's at play, and you want to know whether you want to play along with that style or just do completely your own thing, or whether you want to bring some of that style into your own songs. So I noticed something the other day very interesting. I'm actually, the band the Eagles from the
mm,
70s, right? The 70s and 80s. So I I've gone through many kinds of phases with the Eagles. I used to love them a lot, and then I started to really get tired and irritated with that like classic songwriting thing, and I was breaking out and trying to find like all kinds of like alternate songwriting. Like I was looking at the Lou Reeds and the Radioheads and all the others who like did the subversion.
Yeah.
But recently I've come back to the Eagles a few years ago because I moved in here, and my neighbor Mikey, who's a great guitar player and a singer songwriter himself, used to have a band called Mad Orange Fireworks here in Bangalore.
Mm.
And he's a big Eagles fan, and then I just started listening to them again, and I was like, oh, this is great. Just fantastic harmonies. Just I love their like whatever 4-part, 5-part harmonies that they come up with. But I noticed something about the Eagles catalog. Like if you listen to the 70s Eagles sound, it sounds a certain way. And then suddenly you start getting these sounds like tung dung tung tung dung 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 tung tung dung dung dung, and it starts sounding a bit disco. And
Mm.
guess what? That is the disco era. Like it's the disco has hit the charts, and that's the big music. And I noticed when I used to listen to the Eagles as a teenager in my 20s, I never noticed this. I just thought, okay, they are doing something. But then I realized they are actually moving with the times, and they are finding a way to channel what's happening right now and write music that is along, but somehow still be true to themselves. They're still great songs, but they are now also playing a bit of that disco, whatever is happening in the time around them. I think like great musicians are able to pull it off without compromising their integrity somehow. They're able to enjoy the new style that's coming out and go with it and do it,
Mm.
and still be true to themselves. But for those that are not maybe at that level of confidence or proficiency, it can be quite challenging. Whether
Yeah.
do you go along with what's out there, or do you try to just stick true to what you're doing? I'm not sure the answer is, but I feel the answer would probably be somewhere in between, because there is value to what's happening around you. Most likely the thing that you are doing, which is not like what's happening around you, you may find that it has something to do with your refusing to come out of a comfort zone or something like that. Or it may be something truly, truly original, which is totally against what's happening and totally worth staying, for the art's sake. But you got to watch out. If you're just staying in your comfort zone and, complaining about what's going on out there, then that may be something that the musician themselves need to, look into and introspect or something.
Yeah, mistaking comfort zone for the best idea in the world or the most original song in the world, I think is it's a very human thing, right? Like my
Sure.
shit is the best and doesn't smell.
Right.
Uh, I think what I totally agree with is this whole signature style and sound for a certain period in time, right? And earlier it was the 70s, 60s, 70s, and um, literally if you ask anyone like who listens to music, you're like, okay, Meatloaf, that's one generation of music, or the Beatles, or what. But I feel the I wouldn't say problem, but the nature of the sound is no longer defined by a decade, because it's so fast.
Yeah.
So it's no longer the 70s sound or the 80s
Yeah.
sound of Van Halen defining the 90s, or whatever it may be. But it's like
Right.
almost like now it's
Yeah.
2022 January sound. It's
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah.
fleeting, because
Yeah.
there's so much coming out, like because of indie musicians, because of things like SoundCloud,
Yeah.
and so many sound distribution platforms, and so many
Yeah.
more people have access to putting out their tunes, their tones, their sounds, that could click overnight. Like it could, today it could be a really nice Sam Smith produced fast-paced tune, and that becomes okay, cool for 24 hours. And next thing, I was just listening this morning to something that the Spotify puts out this thing called the Wrap. Basically, they do a lot of data collection from what their listeners like, and at the end of the year, they reward you with a Wrap, which is what
Oh, sure.
your
Yeah.
favorite songs and what you've listened to the most, and give you a playlist and with graphics, and you can put it up on social media saying, this is my Spotify Wrap. And this year, apparently, the top have been Taylor Swift, who's gone massively, madly big. And I think it was Miley Cyrus's song Flowers, and Bad Bunny has some song, I forget the name, and Joe Rogan's podcast. I'm like, those four are the most streamed in the world on Spotify this year.
Okay.
And it's crazy, right? Like the data which is constantly being collected on your listening habits and being used by these services. But it also goes to show that as a collective, our generation, that's worldwide. Earlier it would be, okay, in Bangalore, you guys were big in Bangalore, I think called Lounge Piranha. And I remember those Freedom Rock concerts. And there was a sound, right? Like when there would be a college fest or a thing, um, you would have the Bangalore sound, and then Pentagram back in the day would define the Bombay
Hmm.
sound or the rock sound in India. But it's now truly global and truly changing second by second at some level.
Right. Yeah, that's one thing that I would totally agree with you, that although there have been styles defined by generations, the the time span of a generation has reduced greatly, right? So
Mm.
even when you think about Gen X versus Gen Y versus Gen Z and the boomers before the X, those, the boomers were probably like, I don't know, what was the size of that generation, 10, 15 years or 20 years, I don't know. But by the time you come to Gen Z, I think that's just like a 5 year or an 8 year sort of. So generations have also started becoming smaller.
Yeah.
Our what's it called? Our ability to focus on something, has become smaller, and things are changing faster and faster and faster. So it's like a similar ideas of what were there before, but they just seem to be moving faster and faster and kind of out of control, actually. And I think that's something that in the 21st century we are experiencing. Probably psychologists would have the data on this, but I'm sure that there's a psychological fallout of the world starting to move so fast. And I'm pretty sure you would have had people on this show talking about that by now, because you've had a couple of hundred episodes now of the SoapyRao show.
Yeah, somewhere. I mean, not 200, but maybe what, 150. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So one thing that you were speaking about, though, which occurred to me, as far as the way that things are being streamed and so much of music out there. One interesting thing that is not just a thing of it's the same thing, but it's become faster now, but rather things used to be a certain way, and the whole thing has just completely flipped and become the opposite. Is a little bit maybe in the music industry. There was a When I was growing up, and I've seen this in my lifetime as a teenager, when I was growing up in the 90s or 80s and 90s, the problem was, how am I going to get my music out there, and how am I going to get distributed? Like, how do I get into record stores?
Yeah.
Is the problem, right? And once you do that, like things, that it's going to be out there, it's going to be heard and whatnot. We have completely that overcome that problem, and now we have the opposite problem. Distribution is not an issue. I can make a song today in one day and get it up on Spotify and Apple Music and all these. Like, getting my music into the networks and the platforms is not a problem anymore, which was what the problem was earlier. Now it's a whole different problem. You can easily get out there, but everyone has a sea of music to choose from. How are you going to be the one that they choose?
Yeah.
This was not the problem of the 90s, because we didn't have a sea of music to choose from, at least in India, even more so than the West. There was very limited ways in which access was the problem. Where are you going to get your music from? Like, it's Shankar Recording Library on 8th Cross in Malleshwaram, where I grew
Mm.
up. He would have like lots of the latest CDs coming in, and he would do those CD to cassette transfers,
Ooh,
and it would become
those were
so that's how.
expensive.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's what the normal cassette and chrome cassettes and what are they, gold or
90 minutes,
platinum?
60 minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so you could have like an album, or you could have a sort of a mixtape from him or whatever, and he would make these things for you, and we'd be making mixtapes for each other. Like, hey, where'd you get that song? I want to record it. So access, access, access. That's what it was about. Like, how do I get this? Like, I know this song is out there. Now it's not a problem. Everything, any song you could dream of is out there in pretty high quality, whether it's on YouTube or streaming or whatever. So the problem is the opposite. How are you going to make someone actually think about your song today, and how are they going to choose you, because they have access to everybody and anybody? This for me has become, it's still hard in its own way, but the mind frame has shifted, and you have to think about this in a very different way. Like, the situation today versus the situation what it was back then. The problem has moved.
Yeah. And the distribution game, right? Because it's such a overwhelming aspect of your craft, because you can really love the art, the process of creating your music. Um, but then it's as important to distribute it, right? And get it to reach the people, because you can sit in your own studio putting out the best music, but if no one listens to it, maybe you're happy, but um, who's listening to it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And I find that amazingly, I wouldn't say counterproductive, but we live at a time where someone in Russia can listen to my song or my podcast when I put it out in 2 minutes, right?
right.
Or anywhere, or it could be my neighbor. I'm saying that's the craziness of it.
Right.
But I mean, some staggering number, like there are 1.5 to almost 2 million active podcasts right now out there.
Wow. Okay.
So now, isn't that amazing? Like, um,
Yeah.
earlier, 2019, when I did my radio show, it was for a city of 12 million, which, again, you break it down, English demographic. I don't know how many active listeners, but um, no, I'm just saying that the potential reach is so crazy, but the
Hmm.
potential is also so limited because there are that many more players on the market, which is great.
Yeah.
But uh, what is the end game, right? Is it then finally you kind of go with what is determined by the systems that drive these platforms, um, create the sounds that they push forward, the narrative they push forward, the stories that they think they push forward through the system? Or do you just create a micro system, which is the earlier days, right? Play in your backyard for a barbecue and just have 30 to 100 people who are your patrons. Like in the old days, right? When the king would be a
Right.
patron to a flautist or a pianist or whoever, and then they would just play for the court or they play for the next court. So are we going back to those days? Because it's just gone full circle. It's just mad to get reach. So you have to kind of finally say, screw it, I'll build a local following, and they can support me through whatever patronage they give, and I will again build small groups in cities through the long and lonely road.
Yeah, actually, I was reading about this, and there is a popular opinion in the music industry that actually, like, for a lot of people who are, sort of like disappointed about the situation that is there now, like the fact that recorded music doesn't make you any money anymore,
Mm,
because nobody's really buying recorded music. People are just subscribing to Spotify, and of course, you make money from your streams, but you need millions of streams before that money starts looking anything that is, like not, just pocket change, basically.
yeah.
But there is, so a lot of people disappointed and saying, back then, and me included, like at the fag end of the recorded music era, I had the experience in my band Lounge Piranha
Yeah.
that we used to play live shows, and that was the big thing of what we did. But we had put out a demo and also an album called Going Nowhere.
Hmm.
And one of the things that we managed to do actually quite well was put out merchandise, because we had a lot of good visual artists in the band that were capable of drawing and making this stuff. And so we recorded an album, and we had a really great looking CD. The cover of it and the artwork that was inside, we had posters, stickers, and all this sort of stuff. So we were able to sell merch. But the most important merch item on our table was the CD. Um, and that was something that people were still listening to. They had CD players, and they used to listen to CDs at home and whatnot. So 2007, 8, 9, 10, we sold a lot of CDs at the end of that era. And even the band that I used to play with in Austin, it was about CDs, physical merchandise. People, more than physical merchandise, the point is that people were willing to put down a decent amount of money to buy that piece, because it was not only giving them access to your music, which they could arguably get from an MP3 online, but much nicer quality on the CD, and plus you have a little artifact from the band.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
artifact has, it's not just the artwork but the CD itself and whatnot. So it felt good. People were still buying that. Now, without that CD, playing shows, well, you can still sell your artwork, but not being able to sell your music itself is a bit of a bummer. So you have to sell a lot of other things, and you put it online, and you're not getting much streams. So times have changed, and you have to find another way of doing this. But there is an opinion that have things really actually changed so much? Because if you actually rewind the clock about 100 years ago or 120 years ago, it was the same thing. Like, before the recording industry came into the picture, musicians had to play live music and support themselves with just the quality of their ability to pull off a show, or if they had some other way of something else to sell or something like that, they would manage fine. So a lot of people who look at the music history in a sort of a longer and deeper span of time, they see the 20th century as a kind of golden and slightly decadent era where rock musicians were able to make millions just because of the sale of records. Like they invented a format and of making music and having music players at home and pricing these records at a certain price, and they found an audience like crazy teenagers and young people who love music and are super passionate and willing to throw down $15 or $20 for the latest record and do this multiple times for many albums. It's a lot of money to spend, but it all gets funneled back to the record companies and the big rock stars and whatnot. Some people asking the question, was this just some kind of a golden era for musicians, and that's why you had that crazy decadence that rock musicians are famous for, just doing ridiculous thing, living ridiculous lives? And have we just basically come to the end of that and we have circled back to basically a more humble middle class kind of musician? Is that where we're at? Because I no doubt that it's become democratized, right? Like that's the word for it. Like if music has become so cheap and almost it's become a commodity really at this point. Yeah, so are we back to the days of a more humble musician rather than that crazy rock star? Like, forward 50 years from now, and will that all just seem ridiculous the way that musicians used to be in the 1980s and 90s and the 70s, and all those stories are just like, whoa, it's a crazy time of about 30, 40 years where everyone is just losing it because they found a way to make a lot of money off records and CDs.
Yeah, I think that's a really important way to look at it, because when your frame of reference is, say, in music, the mega stars, um, or in comedy as well, the guys who get the 50, 20, $100 million deals from these platforms, whether it was earlier with record labels who sold their CDs, or today with the big distributors. I think the problem is hearing this and kind of also understanding your context, because I remember when we started out stand up in Bangalore, the shows, it was a very new concept to sell to venues, right? And I remember we approached a performance space which was okay with hosting us because they had open mics, they were okay with the concept. But then we went to a smoothie joint where people were smoking shisha, and literally every time you try to deliver your punchline, a smoothie machine goes off. To a pizza cafe. I mean, we've seen all these places,
Right.
but from 2010, when we had, I think, one venue hosting 2 shows a month, to 2023 with a lot of comedians trying their hand at open mics, to where you would have 50 shows a weekend in Bangalore. So at some points, yes, it's the democratization, but again, it's the um, while there are so many more different language speakers entering comedy, I'm just saying in a Bangalore context,
Mm-hmm.
while there's so much more access, there's also so much more limitation in some way, right? Because you suddenly have earlier it would be, say, the Bangalore Comedy
Right.
Club hosting and starting shows. Now it's like the Whitefield Comedy Collective and the Malleshwaram Kannada Comedy Collective. Like, it's becoming more and more specific, right? Like, you only have
Okay.
Kannada shows in Jayanagar, and you have a club for that. So
Right.
while there's the opportunity for and we were talking about this, I think, right, where I can sit here and be a truly international show, where I have maybe 10 people in Ukraine listening to me, or 5 people in Japan listening to me, or but the numbers are insignificant, even though I'm a truly an international show. uh, but if you are a person going as an Indian to say South Korea and selling out 100,000 tickets to Indians. So do you understand where I'm coming from? Like, it's a very different lens to look at it from, because I can perform, as you said, like the middle class comedian, just 4 shows a month for 50 people at a venue of my choice across the city. But it's not at all close to the Dave Chappelle, the Chris
Sure.
Rock dream,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is being sold as the pinnacle of comedic success, or the Taylor Swift, whatever the tour is called, Eras tour, where it's literally the biggest thing that a single musician has produced on their own. And
Right.
it's very disheartening to tell someone that is not what you're going to be able to do. That is, in fact, what 99% of musicians or comedians won't be able to do, because that's only going to happen for like 0.1%. And that percentage is getting less and less as the concentration of wealth becomes more and more, or not wealth, but you know what I mean,
Mm.
right?
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I guess it depends on what your dreams are. But it reminds me of this thing. There was actually I forgot the name of the author, but it might have been about 15 years ago or 20 years ago or something like that. That someone put out a paper on the music industry, and that got a lot of attention and started spreading around. I think it kind of even got viral. A lot of independent musicians have read this, and you may have heard. Have you heard the phrase "a thousand true fans"?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. So I think it originated from this person who wrote this paper about it. The music industry is changing a lot, and people were wondering, like, now what are we going to do? We can't become rock stars. And if you don't become rock stars, you have to just languish and do something. He said, no, no, wait a second. Just let me show you some arithmetic over here. And let's just do some math. Even if you're never going to become a rock star, but if you can get 1,000 true fans, and the definition is, what is a true fan? Well, a true fan is someone who is basically going to come for all your shows in that city. If you're performing in their city, they're going to come for all your shows. In fact, a true fan will even travel some distance. Like if you're playing in Mysore, they'll still travel from Bangalore to Mysore or Mysore to Bangalore to see. They'll go a little bit of distance too. They're going to buy all your merch. You put out something and your true fan will buy it, like whatever it is, an album or this or that. If you put a funding campaign, they're going to put some good, decent, average amount of money for that. So if you can get 1,000 true fans, you don't need millions, 1,000 true fans, and you can produce X amount of merchandise per year is basically the calculation. If let's say that you're gonna, what can you expect a true fan to spend on you in a year? And if you put that number down to, can you expect your true fan to spend about $200 a year on you,
yeah,
right? And if you can do that, or $300, I think that number that he came up with was a true fan will probably be willing to spend about $300 to $500 on their favorite band during the course of a year, on shows, ticket entries, merchandise, all that stuff. Now just do the math. 1,000 into 300 is $300,000 a
yeah.
year. And if you divide it by like a 3-member or 4-member band, you're all pulling in, about 70, $80,000 a year, which is like a good amount of money, decent enough to make. You're not going to be a millionaire necessarily very soon, but this is how you do it. And you just need your 1,000 true fans. And it's deceptively hard to get your 1,000 true fans.
Yeah.
You'll be lucky to get 1,000 overall fans, but a
Yeah.
1,000 true fans like requires you to have like 10,000 general fans who like your music and will come. So the game, he said then, is for you to do two things. One is, how are you going to grow this audience? Because it is a little bit like the Kannada club in Jayanagar and the other place because what you're not concerned about trying to get to the mass audience in the millions, but you're trying to find your bunch of niche people who care about what you do, and find like about 1,000 or 2,000 of those people who love whatever it is that you do. And your second job is to create product for them that is
Yeah.
worth 300,000 that they're going to spend on, whether it's your music or your merch or whatever. Grow that audience and figure out what your product is in such a way, because they want to spend money on you. You just have to give them something to spend money on.
That's a great way of looking at it because um, it's almost like building your own club.
Right,
Because I see this now in the space of online content where you have earlier videos which would get thousands are now getting millions, right?
right, right,
But
right.
they don't convert to ticket sales. But then you hear about a person who flew from, there's stories like I remember my when I took my, I think I don't know, first or second or third or 100th foray into learning the guitar back in university. My guitar teacher was this hardcore Dream Theater fan, and he
Okay.
drove from Swansea all the way to I think Manchester or something for their show, and lands up at the venue, and it says, "Oh, what's the lead singer's name? James LeBray, one of those
I
guys."
forgot.
He's like, "Oh, the poster said he's got a sore throat and the show's been cancelled."
I should.
So
Okay.
there are guys like that, right? And this happens like what do you call that? Like now you have the Beliebers, you have the Taylor Swift army, and all these things, and they do that, right? She's got I think maybe 1 million true fans because they.
Okay.
I
Right.
mean, my sister lives in Singapore. Her daughter is like really looking to go for the show in Singapore next year, and I think the cheapest ticket or the ticket she wants. I don't know if that. I don't think she wants the cheapest ticket, but it's somewhere around $2,500 for the ticket.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
She's selling out stadiums in less than 20. Like, and this is like next level, right? We've heard of like
Right.
U2 but this is crazy level.
Right.
Like there are people flying from all across Southeast Asia to Singapore. Right? There are two, I think she's just doing one or two countries there. and and that's the thing, right? She's got 1.5 million or 2 million true fans. But yeah, but if you can crack the 1,000, it's not easy, as you said, because it's maybe 1 in 100. So if you have 100,000 fans on social media, maybe you might have 1,000 true fans.
Right.
But imagine telling people that if you're a live performer, say those 1,000 true fans are split across 25 countries, just to be,
yeah.
imagine they'll come for any show wherever you go. Say
Right.
yeah, and then imagine you just like, oh, you put out a poster and a ticket link saying, hey man, I'm doing a show in Singapore, and your true 4 fans come there. The producer of the show's going like, fuck off, dude. Like I can't sustain you as an act, right?
Yeah.
And that's happened for me, right? Like where, they call me to Singapore and I've done a couple of shows, and the people who come have loved it, but it's not the numbers that a promoter wants.
Right.
Because they want the 1,000, 2,000 seaters. They want, and here's another thing what I find interesting though. If you have, and I've spoken to venue owners about this. I'm sure you know the venues, you perform to these places. I get, say, a venue which can fit 150 people, and I get, say, 100 people have come, or maybe 80, or maybe even less, 60 people have come. But that crowd is spending a lot of money on F&B. But then you have a comedian who's younger, or musician who's younger, who gets about maybe 200 people. They're packed to the rafters, right? But they can't even, they don't even want, they pay for the ticket, but they don't want to buy a single Coke or a beer. They don't spend anything. In fact, their billing is less than mine by half.
Right.
So again, that's another interesting thing, right? What is your audience, and what are they willing to do? Are they an audience who wants an evening with you, to come on the journey, have dinner, have drinks, spend extravagantly and have a lovely evening? And not even extravagantly, right? But enjoy the evening. Or someone who's just like, I went for this artist show, so they can take a photo, a selfie, and post it. And that 300 rupees is more of a status symbol as opposed to enjoying the evening with you.
Right. Yeah.
It's quite crazy, I think, because in that case, your million subscribers on YouTube, okay, they might give you $1, they might give you 10 rupees, whatever it may be, but they don't in many cases. Or in the case of Taylor Swift, they give you the heart and soul and every $1 that their parents have earned. Or you have this person who's willing to give you $500, and if 1,000 of them are willing to do that, isn't that enough to sustain your lifestyle and sustain your life? It's amazing.
Yeah. According to this book or this paper, that was the theory that he went with. I wonder though, in this conversation that we're having right now, I'm just wondering whether we've actually progressed from that era of thinking like that to another one now. I don't know if that's the case, but I think I'm still kind of, if you ask me what kind of a mindset I am in as an independent musician, it's that 1,000 true fans kind of mindset, because I think that's my best shot with the kind of music that I make and write. I know that I'm not going to do the Taylor Swift thing, but I think that I've got the 1,000 true fans ability in me and my music. So I hope that the era that we live in supports it.
No, I'm really encouraged to hear that as well, because it's so overwhelming, right? When you're thinking of making a subscription model for the podcast or for whatever your work is.
Right.
And you're trying to say, oh, but then someone says, bro, you have no fucking chance, man, because Netflix charges 600 rupees a month subscription for, you know how much content? They're giving you the best movies in the world. They're giving you Dave Chappelle and his dad or whoever's performing. What right do you have to charge your fans 100 rupees subscription? Right? What are you giving them? And you have nothing to say. But if I say I have 1,000 true fans who'll pay 500,000, or then it's a lot more of an argument that you can defend.
Yeah,
because they're your true fans.
You're not competing with Netflix at that point.
Exactly.
They are probably watching Netflix as well, but they are invested in you, and that's why they're going to give you also that money, because they have a lot more of those rupees wherever they come from, probably.
Absolutely. And they find it worthwhile, right? Like I was talking to a friend who runs a financial research company, right? And he's got a lot of free subscribers to his platform. But he said, when it came to converting those to paid subscribers for the service, zero. I mean, not zero, but very few. So it's like that guy who will be, without hesitation, spend $5,000 on a dinner.
Right. Yeah.
But they won't even think about spending 50 rupees subscription, not just to any podcast or song, but even to, it's a very weird human trait, and I think Indians are specifically good at being very reserved with paying for appreciating their artists or their things. They'll try getting the free
Yeah.
subscription always. But now, having said that, people listening right now, you are, if you're my if you are Abhi's or my true thousand fans or thousand true fans, make yourself known.
Ah, yeah.
Because we are looking for you. You might have found us, but we are looking for you.
Yeah, put your
Um,
hands up and be counted.
yeah. And speaking of that, let's talk about the thing which you're worked on for the past few months, and which is out now, which is an audio journey called Portal Waiting. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. Portal Waiting is an album that I started writing in 2020, just after the gates closed and the pandemic started, or rather the other way around. The pandemic started and the gates closed.
Yeah.
Um, I had just done, actually, I've been through a long journey. I used to play with Lounge Piranha, as you pointed out, and that had a kind of an edgy post grunge kind of a sound up to 2010. And after the band split up, I have to confess the 2010s were a pretty hard decade for me overall, because I kind of went into a personal sort of a collapse and sort of um, went into depression and a few other things that happened at the start of that decade. But climbing out of it, I think my music changed a lot. Like, first of all, I, from being a band player, I became a singer songwriter. And I think I needed that to just face my fears of getting on a stage alone with just my guitar and my inabilities for singing and guitar playing completely exposed. Because in a band, you can kind of hide it a little bit because there's all this other stuff going on. But
Yeah.
I needed to do it. I needed to actually work on my actual, my abilities and practice them a little bit and try to get as good as I wanted to. And my songs also changed a little bit, and they became very personal and about myself and my close relationships. And they were very, very personal and really about relationships and love and that kind of thing. I did a motorcycle tour in 2019 that we call the Silver Bullet Tour. I took my Bullet, my 350cc motorbike out
Mm.
and toured around India. It was about 2 months long, and think I did about 19 shows or so, 19, 20 shows. Small venues just all over from Bangalore all the way up to Delhi and back.
Mm.
Came back in early 2020, and the pandemic happened, and boom, everything suddenly we are locked down indoors. And I think in that moment, I found that I straight away got to work in terms of I was trying to figure out ways to keep myself sane, because I knew that I live alone, and if I don't sort of keep myself busy, I'm going to go crazy. So immediately I started figuring out things to do during the day. I'm a DSP audio coding guy. I'm a music tech sort of an engineer. So I
Mm.
do some or DSP development for audio companies. So I got into a good routine for that. I got into a routine for my, music playing, practice, writing, whatever you call it, exercise. I was always pretty good with exercise, but I became a fanatic during the pandemic, like every day, like 6, 7 days a week, like sort of going at it. So routine to keep myself sane. And in that process, in this sort of locked in atmosphere that I had, and my only view at the world was literally this very screen that I'm looking at right now.
Mm.
And there was so much coming at it, the kind of information coming through the pandemic, like scary, what is the world? And I think the whole world became a bit introspective also, like, why are we here right now? What have we been doing? And a lot more the conversation around capitalism and sort of this free market economics, and what it has led to climate change and various other things, and how we have been responsible for the mess that we are in or something. These kind of conversations started happening a lot more. And
Yeah.
I think in that mood, I started writing songs that really started looking outwards. Earlier, it was me, my relationships and love, and how I feel about this and that and what happened between us. And now suddenly it was like looking at the rest of the world sort of a thing. And I think that's what defines that album. It's a 6-song album that I started writing in 2020. The songs were the basic structure, and the ideas of the songs were ready very quickly. I had a demo ready before the end of the year, and I'd even approached my musician friends to record their parts pretty early. And so I had my first part with musicians' parts played on them by the end of 2020. And then I took some 3 years after that, close to 2.5 years, to actually put out the album. And the
Mm.
reason was because I don't think I got stuck necessarily in a bad way, although in some ways I was. But I think I started working on very minute rewrites of all the songs, because what I realized was they weren't just six songs that were roughly about the same topic. I started getting the feeling that they were actually, related to each other and progressively told a story. And I wondered, is this a concept album? Like where you actually have a story that's flowing through, and the order of the song matters and whatnot. It was something new. I've never done something like this or thought of doing something like this. It was not intentional at all. But I decided to entertain that possibility and sort of start then saying, okay, well, it's not a concept album as it is. It feels like it has the potential to be one, but I'm going to have to work on the lyrics and the story of each song and think about who is the protagonist, who's actually going through from song one to song two to song three, and what's his actual story. If it's a concept album, it can't just be good enough to just say, okay, they are vaguely related. I
Ah,
wanted to see if I could build actually a story. And for that, there were minute rewrites required for all the songs to sort of just, keep the song in the same place, but try to make it so that they connect to each other in a certain way. Song four, which is called Invisible Hand, and it's definitely not the hit song on the record because it's not one of those catchy numbers, although a few people have noticed it so far. But it became this sort of crux around which I built what is the tension in the album about, or rather the tension in the protagonist's mind. And it becomes an argument about free market economics, basically two guys talking at each other in a speakeasy. And who are those two people? Like, I think I went through about 22 revisions of that song until I reached the one that I thought, okay, this is it. This is what defines it for me. So it's one of those things where I have a song on the album that means everything to me in terms of defining the state of mind of what the protagonist is going through. But it's definitely not the hit song on the album, but it's important to me, kind of a thing. So I think I went through this for a while before I came into 2022 end of the year, and I finally decided to bring, and I felt like I was ready. I got Toby Joseph from Chennai to actually mix the album for me, and he mixed and mastered by the end of 2022. And then I had a new problem, which is okay. And I even had a video. Raja Ram Rajendran and his company made a beautiful video for the first single, All Aboard is what it's
mm,
called, like really well shot and well produced, like super nice. Um, but I didn't know how I was going to support this music. Like once it goes out, what am I going to do? Like how am I going to get people to? I need some kind of a live act or something that I'm going to do from time to time to support it. And first started playing with musicians to get a band together, but somehow I didn't like, they were great musicians and they were showing up for rehearsals and whatnot, but I didn't see that we're going to be able to push this through and everybody stays in town and with commitment play like a year or two of shows. And besides, we only have six songs for this album. I have other songs, but I'm starting to feel now like the album is a concept album.
yeah,
So what do? I said, well, I think I need to do something else. And I think I was even talking to you around this time and I was saying, I feel like maybe I could have a podcast. Like, what if I started putting out, like, thought of it's a concept album, it has a story. Maybe I can put out an episode every 2 weeks or something like that around
yeah.
it. And I started seriously considering that possibility and building a world around the album and started recording some parts. And I showed it to some friends in early 2023. And the first question I got asked by two of them immediately was, why podcast? Why isn't this just part of your live show? And I was like, come on, I can't do this live. That's crazy. Like, this is not how you do a music show. You can't have all this sound design and dialogue and characters. Like, that doesn't make sense in a music venue. I don't see how it could be possible, with speakers and with people serving drinks. And that's not going to. And then somebody said something that changed the game a little bit. It may have been Vishruti or it may have been Aman. I think it was Vishruti who said, why don't you just do it on headphones? Like the entire audience is on headphones. And I thought, that's crazy. That's not practically like, where are you going to get it? Oh, but there was one part of my mind that was really excited because I
Mm,
love headphones. I love the headphones experience. I love doing this with you right now. We're both
yeah,
on headphones and listening to, because with headphones, you can really control the experience a lot. You speak from a distance and it sounds a bit like it's coming from here. And then you can suddenly make it super intimate by coming close to the headphone like this and make it feel like the person is talking into your ears. So there's scope for drama, with headphones that's just not there with speakers. And I thought, hey, what if I do this? Like with a headphone experience, like I'm not bothered by like all the other stuff that's going on. I have full control on the audio. I can pan things left, right, do some crazy sound design. And then I'm like, how am I going to write a story and do this? Don't worry, I'll figure it out. I have friends who'd help me. Sandeep will comment on my story and give me feedback. I've got other people and I can do this. And so I just went with it. I can do this. This is now no more like a music show, but it's theater almost. And we're going
Mm.
to do it as a headphones only experience. And we went with it. Along the way, I got two wonderful young ladies, Vishruti and Pratana, who have started a company called Neon Culture to help me with. They liked the album and they liked the show because I showed it to them, and they said, "Yeah, we're on board. We're going to help you put this out." And that's indeed what they've been doing. And so I put out two singles with two videos in October, in August and October, and I finally opened the show and put out the album Portal Waiting on November 17th, and we got a pretty nice response for that first show. So looks like we're taking a break through December, but I think 2024, we're going to get busy with the show and the album promo. So, yeah, thanks for asking. That's what that's about.
That's such a brilliant story, man, because you know the whole idea of taking time to understand where you are in life as a person and not just plowing through with the same kind of things that you've succeeded in as a past musician, right? Like with Lounge Piranha, or the sounds that you learned, because you obviously got good at playing grungy kind of music. And I find that a really amazing trait in you and people like you, is letting go of that to learn something new, to get on a new adventure, to kind of pick up something which reflects who you are and at which part of your life you're in a
Yeah,
better way.
exactly. Yeah,
And that's
yeah,
amazing. It's amazingly scary to do, because, you know, if like one kind of way of storytelling or songwriting or music playing is working for you, it's very hard for a human being to let go of that and say, I'm going to do something which is closer to my soul. And more often than not, you kind of just stay in your comfort zone. I think that's what we do. But no, this idea, and also taking your time, because we're in this thing that, oh my god, I don't put out a new song every 3 months, I'm forgotten. But
right,
taking your time,
right.
taking the effort, of course, the dedication to your project, I think it's really really cool to even go down this path to experiment over headphones and do an entire theatrical music thing. And I think that in itself is a real sort of hats off to you, man, because it takes a lot of balls and um, commitment to yourself and your growth as a human being to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandeep.
So I'm excited. I'm excited to be a part of it. I couldn't come for the November show, but I'll be there in Jan, and I want to know what this feeling is like to kind of go through a live headphone experience, because I do all my listening on headphones, on
Right.
different kinds. From this podcast, I do it with over ear headphones, to my music with Bluetooth headphones. And I'm not talking about the actual make of the headphone, but it's, you know, it's what comes into your ears is such a big thing. And we spoke about this yesterday, is what different sounds do to you, right? Emotionally,
Yeah, yeah,
physically, what inputs they can give you about your environment, what they can tell you about the people in the environment, the mood of the environment. When you go to a place where, you know, the people are aggressive and they're talking in an aggressive tone, you feel edgy, you feel uncomfortable. When you go to a
right,
music venue which has had many bands playing, the vibe is good energy, right? You feel like there is a sense of warmth.
right.
You go to, like, you know, any place, like even a pub which plays top 40 songs, to a place like Pico's, which is, I think, illegal because of the sanitation standards, but still there's a vibe to it, right? um, but I'm just saying, there's, like, you know, we spoke about this earlier about music and how it affects the brain. My wife doesn't play an instrument. In fact, when she wanted to play something for my daughter on the piano, the first song she kind of played with one finger was that song which everyone listens to on the train, is that Pardesi, Pardesi. I'm like,
Oh, okay.
yeah. She's like this. I'm not going to be the musical influence, but for her, she's such a happy. Her disposition is so happy, because every day in a house, they were playing the radio when she woke up,
Okay,
like, and
okay.
that's a habit for her.
Yeah,
And it's such a nice influence, right? And to kind of pull back from the intensity of music to whatever it is, I want that to be the influence for my daughter as well, because um, we didn't have that at home, because the moment there was music in the car, it was like, stop it, it's too loud, right? Music was
uh,
only for parties. It was only when you're dancing, or when, you know, it's
okay.
but I love the idea of music being a part of everyone's life, from the moment they wake up to through different parts of their day. If they can work with it, if they can work out to it, they can chill out with it, they can engage with friends over it, to
Yeah,
sleep with it. I think it's
yeah.
such an important element, just like breathing exercises. I think music for each mood. And I think we are living at a time, especially as a consumer of music, to have all of those days and activities catered to, right? They have playlists for working out, playlists for meditation. And
Sure.
I think you're just adding another layer to it, which is um, something which really gives me hope as a consumer of audio content for the past 14, 16 years, and the ability to look forward to these kinds of creations and a new medium of hearing stories, which is blending music. And I know it's there in some form or the other, and a lot of people have tried it and are trying it and will try it. But it's crazy, right? In to have good music songwriters thinking theatrically, musically, and as storytellers, and breaking those boundaries and merging those boundaries between stage and spoken word. And because it reminds me, Tim Minchin, he's another brilliant musical comedian who tells
Okay.
these stories of where we are as human beings, and just does such a great job. He's this Australian guy, and I think
Okay.
more and more people like that, and like what you're doing, I think is what is um, exciting for the future of where we are.
Hey, thanks. Yeah. For me, I think the process was definitely has been a result of not completely breaking out of my comfort zone, but also a lot to do with what I subjected myself to, or what I was exposed to, rather, not subjected myself to, in the 2010s,
Yeah,
where I ended up doing a lot of sound design work and composition work for film and theater.
yeah.
And so I was part of a lot of theater processes more than film. I think like being part of theater, where you get into a rehearsal room for like for 2 weeks sort of a rehearsal, or sometimes a month long rehearsal to make the making of a play. And you meet people from all kinds of abilities, like from script writers, storytellers, to other musicians, to actors, to set designers, to all kinds of people who come together to make the theater of this whole thing come together. And
Mm,
the process of like already having a story and going through drafts, I wasn't doing it. I was watching the director and the writers sort of go through this process, and actors delivering lines. And then, you come after 5 days and they say, okay, we've made some change to script and now it's going to be like this, like this. So watching them go through those drafts and seeing literally with my own eyes and ears how a story is crafted. I never did it myself, but I was watching how they were doing it. I think that was all of a great help to me. I don't think I could have done it without the experience that I had in theater, and with some of the amazing people that I had the privilege to watch. So one person comes to mind. His name is Abhishek Majumdar. And he's a director that I worked with quite a lot. But the process of being in that room and making like 3 plays, I think, that I worked on with him, and with a fair amount of intensity, each one of them, I think it left a lasting impression on how the process and the patience required to craft a story from the start
mm.
to the end. And I think I channeled a lot of that, although not directly, but just probably I got some confidence for it from just those experiences that I've had. And I think that plays a big role for all of us, when we're venturing out to do something outside of our comfort zone or something that's new. I think a lot of the little things that we've done along the way to get out of our comfort zone, although at that time it doesn't feel like much, but someday, like a few years later, it might all come together to enable you to take that large leap, that big step that you want to take for yourself. So I think those little things are really important, the daily things, the little projects, the side projects that you immerse yourself in right now, they'll all play a big part 5 years from now, because they'll become your main project someday.
Well said. I think that's so important to know because always look for the big win, riding into the sunset, accepting that award on the Grammy stage. But the the small wins, the small effort, waking up 20 minutes earlier, doing an extra day of exercise or whatever it may be, that thing you do for yourself, the thing you do for your work, like practicing for 20 more minutes, it just gives you the resilience when you need it for that big
Yeah. Right.
opportunity when it does come.
Right. Right.
Super, man. And I think this is great for people who are, aspiring musicians, storytellers, to just, if nothing else, to show that there's an avenue which, if it's not out there, can be created by you.
Yeah.
And I think that's really good about what your story represents and what you've done with it. So, Abhi, thank you so much, man. I think um, it's been, I'm not, I think it has been a great conversation. Chatting with you today has been really an eye opener in many ways, but also has kind of resonated deep down with a lot of the decisions and directions I've taken. And it's, I think, frankly, inspiring for a lot of upcoming musicians or established musicians, even just to listen to your story and what you've chosen to do with it. So, hats off, respect, and thanks for doing this with me today.
Hey, Thank you. Thank you so much, Sandeep. And a lot of hats off and respect to you also for what you do. I think it's really amazing. We've been meaning to have this conversation for a long time between you and me, and you were kind enough to wait for me to put out this album because you talked to me 2 years ago, and I said, "Yeah, just give me a month or two. I'm going to put out an album." Well, two
Yeah.
years later, I came back. Better late than never. It's out. But thank you for what it is that you do, man. Having this kind of a show and talking to people, having great conversations, and doing inspiring stuff for all the people that are listening to it. So thank you too. It's been a
Thank you.
privilege.
Thank you, man. And it's honestly, it doesn't feel selfless because I enjoy it so much. And if people can enjoy it along with me, then, I can't be more thankful. So appreciate it. And yeah, thank you for coming on the podcast, because without guests, I'll just be a madman talking to myself, which I do anyway. But I can't do it for more than 20 minutes because there's a legal limit beyond which prescriptions are involved.
Right.
Cheers, brother. Thank you so much. All the
Okay.
best for the album. And I look forward to being with my headphones that are part of. I always mess this up at the end. It's perfect till now, and I just have to say something. My words get tied up. What I meant was, I look forward to being a part of your show with my headphones on.
I do too. Yeah, I was inviting you to that first one, and I will invite you to the next ones also because I think it'll be specifically good for you. So
Yeah.
can't wait.
Look
January.
forward to it. Cheers, brother.
Okay. Cheers,
Sounds
Sandeep.
good.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Hey, thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you like what you heard, please do check out the other episodes on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And I would much appreciate it if you could like the video, share it with people who you think might enjoy it, and of course do subscribe to the channel, because it will help me and the podcast grow and reach more people just like you. So thanks again. Appreciate it.